Today on Mental Health Radio, Take It From Us, we talk about sleep. What's its connection with mental health? What comes first, bad sleep or bad mental health? It's a catch-22, a chicken and egg sort of dilemma. Can be as bad as a sort of a vicious circle. In other words, does our mental health deteriorate leading to poor sleep, or does poor sleep cause us mental health issues? Is your mental health leading to sleepless nights and yawn-filled days? The data paints a picture that as many as 50 to 80%, that's 50 to 80% of people living with typical psychiatric illnesses also report chronic sleep problems. I'll just say that again, that 50 to 80% of people living with typical psychiatric illnesses also report chronic sleep problems. And that's compared to less than 20% of the general population. So here's counselling psychologist Vicky Baird to shed light on the connection between sleep and our mental health. Big issue, this issue of sleep, isn't it? I mean, what is the power of sleep?
Okay, so the power of sleep is twofold, Sheldon. Basically, sleep helps to restore and rejuvenate not just our physical body, but also our mind. So, for instance, the recommended number of hours sleep a night an adult should have is between 7 and 9 hours a night. And what happens when we are sleeping is that our body is being able to balance and repair cells. It also clears out the brain, clears out chemicals, balances hormones, helps to balance our metabolism, and also obviously gives us the rest that we need. And so physically, it's essential for rejuvenation, it's particularly in our cells, but also mentally, it's an important time when we're able to mentally process and clear out, if you like, what's been going on throughout the day.
I mean, sometimes those mental issues, those problems that we've got, those emotional issues are the very things that are likely to keep us awake.
Yes, that's certainly true, and we will be discussing, I guess, quite in depth about the link between mental health and sleep.
Yeah, a bit later on in the program. So are there different types of sleep, in terms of the quality?
Yep, so the type of sleep that we have is very important, and it might be useful just to explain briefly. There's 4 main stages of sleep, and the 4 stages tend to go around in 90-minute cycles. So stage 1 of sleep lasts for the first 5 or 10 minutes, and that's a stage when we're not fully asleep and we're not fully awake. We're in this kind of light, almost daydreaming state. We're kind of drifting off. Stage 2 is when we're going a bit more into, we're heading towards a deeper sleep. And that's when we start to disengage from our surroundings. So we start to not be concerned with the sounds or movements around us. Our breathing and our heart rate begin to slow down, become more regular, and our body temperature drops. And then stage 3, and now stage 3 and stage 4 are really the important stages of sleep. So in stage 3, this is often referred to as delta sleep. So this is when the delta brainwaves are happening, and this is our most deepest and restorative, physically restorative part of the sleep pattern. So this is when our blood pressure drops, our breathing slows right down, our muscles begin to relax. As our muscles begin to relax, the blood supply to muscles actually increases, and this helps with the rejuvenation of muscles and cells. And there's particular hormones released at that time which help with tissue growth and repair. so repair of the skin and major tissues in the body. So that stage 3 is really important for that physical regrowth and generation. And then stage 4 is what's often referred to as rapid eye movement sleep, or REM. And that's the stage of sleep when we actually, our muscles are actually turned off. So, like, for instance, our arms and legs, we can't actually physically move. So if you've ever had the experience of waking up from a dream and not being able to move, you've been in that rapid eye movement sleep. You actually can't physically move. Interestingly enough, although that experience can be quite terrifying if you wake up from a bad dream and feel that, that's actually quite protective, because when we're in that rapid eye movement sleep, our muscles switch off so that we don't actually hurt ourselves, so we don't twist and turn and move around. In that rapid eye movement sleep, that's when our brain is doing the processing of the day. That's when we have our dreams. And that's probably the time when we are processing, making sense of what's happened in the day, flushing out any old chemicals, or clearing out the neurotransmitters in the brain.
Generally, what are the best ways of getting a good night's sleep, Vicky?
Okay, in general, so there's quite a few things that can help. So I'll just run through a few briefly. One is to keep a regular sleep and wake schedule. So in other words, to go to bed at the same time every night, to get up at the same time every morning. Obviously, try not to drink too much caffeine before you go to bed. So maybe about 4 to 5 hours before you go to bed. Cut down on your caffeine intake. Don't drink too much caffeine through the day either. Also alcohol as well, so be careful with alcohol. It's recommended that you don't drink alcohol 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed.
I mean, just on alcohol, it does seem to have quite a dramatic impact. I mean, it can result in us being able to go to sleep quite quickly, but then there's a pattern, isn't there? And I think we wake up often midnight, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
If you're an older bloke like me, you're probably woken up by the need to go to the toilet. But I believe that it's not only that reason that alcohol does wake you up.
It's not. It's actually because so alcohol might initially have that effect of relaxing you, but the effect of alcohol actually wears off quite quickly. So if you have a couple of glasses of wine, say, you will feel relaxed, you might go to sleep, but it's often that you will wake up quite quickly, so you won't complete those important sleep cycles.
Right. Does it mean that you won't get back to sleep, or you've just interrupted the...
You've just interrupted it, basically, yeah. Yep. So those things, so avoid alcohol, caffeine. Also, avoid eating too many heavy meals before you go to bed. So try and eat earlier in the evening. Keep it light. Getting regular exercise throughout the day. So making sure that you're doing some kind of movement or exercise physically, so that you can feel physically restful and ready for sleep. However, you have to be careful that you don't exercise to do too much vigorous exercise before you go to bed. So if you're going to do a gym session, at 10 o'clock at night, it might not fit, your schedule.
I remember playing squash, and we used to play masters squash, and sometimes start at 9 o'clock at night, and you might be out at Silverdale or Howick or something like that. So, you'd have a very hard game, and then probably a few drinks after the squash, and not get home until 12:30 at night. And that, I just felt devastated. I never slept well after playing competitive squash. So that's an example.
Definitely, yeah, that's a really good example. And generally, on that note, you want to be thinking about your sleep routine. So winding down, how do you wind down for those last few hours in the evening before you go to bed?
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
Essentially, Vicky, what can happen when we sleep badly?
Okay, well, Sheldon, if we sleep badly, particularly if it happens over a number of nights and over a prolonged period of time, our body can be activated into the stress response. So we become on like hyperarousal, high threat. We have elevated levels of stress hormones in our body. And this can obviously have an impact on different systems in the body. I mean, sleep is crucial, as we know, for the body to fight off disease, to fight off viruses. So if we sleep badly, that can impact our immune system. We're not able to fight off disease and viruses as well. It can also particularly affect, blood pressure, high blood pressure, as I said. So when the body is in a stress response, it hasn't slept for a number of days or weeks or months, our blood pressure is elevated. This contributes to things like elevated risks of heart attacks, strokes, cancer, heart disease, that kind of thing. Sorry,
please carry on.
I was just going to say that also an important factor in this is it seems that sleep is hugely important in terms of balancing metabolism. So when we don't get enough sleep or we're not getting the proper sleep, that can have a huge impact on our metabolism. And that can obviously lead to, for instance, type 2 diabetes. And we also know that metabolism affects also is a risk factor for other chronic diseases.
So our metabolism is really how our body system works?
Yeah, basically how it balances, for instance, blood sugar, energy levels, that kind of thing. So it has can take a toll on our mental health. We can become more highly stressed about not having sleep. We can become more reactive to things because we're in that kind of fight or flight response. We're easily reactive, so we might be more sensitive or we might get more aggressive. This can obviously not only impact ourselves but our relationships as well.
And our mental health. We can become more depressed, more anxious. And so that's when the vicious spiral can sort of occur. We start to get worried about sleep. I mean, can we actually get to the point where poor sleep, we have a dread of going to bed because we virtually predict that our sleep is going to be bad?
Yeah, that's the other catch-22 situation, and that happens quite a lot. So it's a bit of a knife edge because, yes, it is important to have good sleep, but if we're not getting good sleep, it's also important to keep perspective in that and try not to become too preoccupied with it, because the more we become preoccupied with it, the more we get anxious before we go to sleep. That just heightens the effects. So I recall working with a young man once who got particularly preoccupied with his sleep to the point where that was just taking over his entire life. Like if he didn't get a 7-hour sleep each night, it would just be catastrophic for him. And he became so fixated on that it actually led to him not being able to have good sleep each night. So it's quite a fine balance.
And the consequences of that, of not having a decent sort of a sleep because he was anxious about probably going to bed and anxious about how much sleep he would get. Was there an outcome there? I mean, did that...
Yeah, his mental health deteriorated, pretty severely.
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
What's the link between trouble sleeping and depression, particularly, Vicky?
Yeah, Sheldon. So It's very common for people presenting with depression to also have trouble sleeping. So it's estimated anywhere between 65 to 90% of adults with clinical depression do have significant sleeping troubles or even a sleeping disorder. And also it's very common also in anxiety. As well. So many adults with anxiety, probably over 50% of people with anxiety do report having sleep disturbances and sleep disorders.
Sleep apnea is mentioned here, and that was an issue which contributed to my depression, because sleep apnea is when you actually stop breathing and you wake up with some degree of anxiety and shock, but often I didn't realise what had happened. And, this was only detected really by accident. And as a result, I have a small sort of, looks like a rugby player's mouth guard, which is very convenient to put in one's mouth. It's not a big machine or anything like that. And I'm sure that has contributed dramatically to better quality sleep and to less depression up until the last couple of months anyway. I still use that, and I'm sure it's having a beneficial effect.
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
Well, what is known as the sort of catch-22 dilemma in terms of sleep and mental health?
So it's just coming back to that thing of often mental health issues and sleep issues go hand in hand. Which one comes first? It's a complex question. And it depends on the individual as well. We know there's so many factors that affect and influence mental health, and sleep is one of them. But at the same time, there's so many factors that affect and influence the way that we sleep. For instance, time of life, age, personal differences, levels of stress, that kind of thing. So basically that chicken and egg thing it's a complex relationship between sleep and mental health, and it's dynamic, and it's not one or the other, it's both working together really. And I know in my work as a psychologist, when I'm dealing with those issues, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions to try and really understand and unpack all the context around someone's situation and what's actually going on, and what's the function of the sleep and the sleep issue. What's the function? Is it an avoidance of something else? Is it a coping mechanism? Is it just elevated levels of stress hormone, elevated levels of anxiety? So it's really important, and I think if you're having these issues, that's why it's important, or can be really helpful, to go and talk to a professional that can help you understand what's going on, to actually get a really deep understanding of what's happening.
And a professional would be a psychologist like yourself?
Yeah, of course.
Of course.